Throughout history, there have been hundreds of thousands of players to put on an NFL jersey, but none have been as underappreciated as Ben Roethlisberger. He's never been considered among the game's elite players, and it's hard to understand why. Whether it's hate that he receives in the media.
Does he need another one to be considered an all-time great?
He does.
Or lists from alleged analysts ranking the greatest quarterbacks of all time, he just never seems to get the credit he deserves. In this three-part series, I'll look at why I believe he's the most underrated player in NFL history. Part 1 will look at the media hate he's received, Part 2 statistical evidence, and Part 3 will disprove the false narrative surrounding Ben. Now for Part 1, we're going to look at the media hate Ben has received. Whether it should be this way or not, the media plays a huge role in determining greatness in sports today. At the end of the day, most people don't have the sports IQ to determine for themselves who the greatest are, so they listen to the media. Our current era of social media has made this even worse, as any idiot with $30 who can buy a microphone and has the time to set up a YouTube page is now considered an expert. Before we go any further, I do see the hypocrisy here. I hope you don't consider me an expert just because I have a YouTube page. I hope you watch these three parts and see all the statistical data and things like that I've come up with and come to a conclusion for yourself on whether or not my take is correct. Now, any of us that follow sports know that even the professionals in media don't know what they really think all the time, and they constantly contradict themselves. Here's Colin Cowherd in 2016, 2017, and 2018 talking about Ben Roethlisberger.
Big Ben's a supermodel. Okay, you saw those four quarterbacks. Stop arguing. That stuff right there, first ballot Hall of Fame. He has been overshadowed. He's never been as polished as Tom Brady. He's never been as the brainiac of Peyton Manning. He doesn't go on Saturday Night Live. He doesn't have a comedic talent. He's not as likable and as kind of Midwest and Southern as Brett Favre. Big Ben has never gotten the credit that he deserves. And it sounds crazy to say that. Top 10 all-time in wins, touchdowns, passing yards, and completion percentage. They just don't roll guys off the conveyor belt like Ben Roethlisberger. I'd sign a check tomorrow for another 4 years with Big Ben.
Now here's Colin Cowherd in 2022.
Because Ben got it all. Oh, he'll make the Hall of Fame. All of them will. But what wasted talent? And I look at Ben and I think so many hits, so much little off-season commitment, never really adapted beyond the big arm. Oh, what could have been? When I think of Ben, I think of so much given and so little accomplished.
Confused? So am I. But the point of these videos aren't to prove that Colin Cowherd or any other sports analyst is an idiot, because let's be real, you already knew that. Rather, I want to get rid of the notion that the media are experts. They're just people with opinions, and often those opinions are wildly inconsistent. When it comes to Ben Roethlisberger, I believe you can see time and time again that there is in fact a media bias against him. A great example of this is the idea that Roethlisberger is not accountable, which has been pushed on us by the entire sports media world.
What I have an issue with is his constant inability to take responsibility for anything.
He's not accountable.
But the inability to take accountability for his own mistakes and to air out teammates, I find egregious and unnecessary.
Oh, I think you're wrong.
You know, just awful play by me.
Just missed the throw. I'll take it. I'm not going to blame anything but myself. I wasn't good enough today.
It doesn't matter when you give them 14 more. That's on me, and I'll take full blame for those points and that loss, because you can't put your defense in that situation.
Either way, that's on me. I'll take those. And those are big plays that we need.
This narrative has been closely paired with the narrative that Ben unfairly criticizes his teammates.
That Big Ben Roethlisberger has a history of throwing teammates under the bus.
I've earned the right to call out my teammates. This is the head coach's job.
Where he kills everyone on the team and he's supposed to be some leader.
Fast forward to 2022, and Chase Claypool's late-game antics costing the Steelers valuable time in a 2-minute drill. When Roethlisberger was asked about it, he said, "That's not my job. That's the coach's job to handle." His response was ridiculed in the media, as people said this showed that he didn't care about being a leader on the team. Quote, "That's a complete abdication of the leadership responsibilities inherent to playing the position quarterback. Either it's a sign that Roethlisberger has checked out as he plays out the string, or it's conclusive proof that he was never a leader.
That doesn't even make any sense!
This idea that Roethlisberger is a poor leader has been stirred up by the media for years now.
Ben Roethlisberger, as he always has been. This is why he's not a great leader.
Trying to implore the rest of the team to look at Ben as a leader, and he's not.
Because Big Ben Roethlisberger is a huge problem inside that locker room.
Now, most of the leadership criticism has come from the fallout and feud with ex-teammate Antonio Brown. Ironically, I'm still waiting to see the article where somebody bashes Tom Brady for his fallout with Antonio Brown, but that's neither here nor there. Despite the fact that Antonio Brown has clearly proven himself to be an idiot, it's still always somehow Ben's fault. Look no further than his weekly radio session in Pittsburgh.
He has his weekly therapy session, which is a radio interview with my friends in Pittsburgh, and he airs out the entire team. He's the only quarterback in the league that acts like this.
We're talking about our idiot kicker who got liquored up and ran his mouth off. So.
He's the only quarterback in the league that acts like this.
Not only is Ben Roethlisberger held to a standard that other quarterbacks aren't, but in a lot of instances, he literally can't make the media get off of his back. He ended his weekly radio session after the outbreak with Antonio Brown, and yet nobody ever talks about that. To this day, people who don't like Ben and want to make Ben out to be a bad leader still talk about the radio show, and they talk about it like every teammate that ever played with Ben hated it. During the game against Denver, where Ben called out Antonio Brown after the game and then all of this beef started, he also called out James Washington, and Washington went to the press and thanked Ben because he said Ben was right and it gave him something to improve on. But nobody ever talks about that. It's always the negative things, and it's always Ben's fault. Even in retirement, the media is still on Ben. Recently, he's come under fire for comments about Lamar Jackson that he made on his podcast, even though there was nothing negative in the comments. But every sports analyst has been writing or talking about Ben Roethlisberger. During the same week, Marquise Pouncey went on the Ramon Foster show, and the two of them shared stories of Roethlisberger's greatness to the point where he would call out routes out loud, and he didn't care if the defense heard them. Don't believe me? Well, in 2020, Marlon Humphrey, a cornerback for the Ravens, said the exact same thing about Roethlisberger.
Big Ben say something to the wide receivers, and I'm like, listen, and I'm like, did he just tell him to play? I'm like, did he just tell him the route he's about to run?
Wow.
And he does it again, like the next play, and I'm just like, is this I couldn't believe it. Like, I was like, I don't know if they were in hurry up, and that's what they had always done it or what, but he was just verbally telling them.
But after Pounce and Foster's stories, where was Ben's media love? Now, we all know if Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers had a former teammate come out and talk about this, it would be the top story on ESPN, and everyone would be talking about how great they were that they were able to do this at the line of scrimmage. But when Ben does it, nobody cares. If you need more proof for the media disdain and bias against Ben Roethlisberger, look no further than the 2020 playoffs. Tom Brady tossed 3 second-half interceptions in an NFC Championship game where he did not play very well. He threw for only 280 yards, had 3 interceptions, completed only 55% of his passes, and had a QBR of 73.9. Roethlisberger's 2020 playoff game against the Browns has been ridiculed by everybody, despite throwing for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. Now, you can talk about the 4 interceptions, and don't worry, come back for part 3, and I'm going to break down that game as well as all the other alleged playoff failures of the Steelers. But look at the media's response to the 2 performances.
Thomas Edward Patrick Brady Jr. At age 43, the GOAT just went to Lambeau Field and outplayed the man I call the phony GOAT.
And I don't care how loaded the Bucs are. Brady went to 9 Super Bowls with Belichick, barely lost 3 of them. And then goes to Tampa, and I don't care how loaded they are. He's in the Super Bowl again.
He had Godwin on the boundary, but he just said...
you got to make that throw. That wasn't no...
Nope.
He's wide open.
This is the GOAT. This is the GOAT. You just say, nope, I'm not even going to try it.
What you mean you don't try it? A wide open guy?
Shannon Sharp says, oh, you got a pick 6. You threw the game away.
The guy's wide open.
Sorry.
And now he's taking a squad that looked lost just 1 year ago to the biggest game of all time. Tom Brady is an icon. He's a legend. He's a GOAT for a reason.
Rodgers had chances in this game where he didn't come through and Tom Brady did, period.
I'm crying too because you turned it over 5 times.
He did.
Well, he did. He turned it over 4 times.
4
The center,
times.
the first one on Ponce.
This is on Ben. Listen. Interceptions speak volumes. There's a reason you mentioned Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers and guys like that as being on a different level than Big Ben Roethlisberger.
You do realize the reason why you got to that number is because you put the Steelers in the hole to begin with.
Look worse by far than both. It's time to stop being a sports romantic. Move on.
Now, I'm not trying to say that Ben Roethlisberger is better than Tom Brady or anything like that. But in these playoffs, it was pretty obvious that Roethlisberger played better than Brady, and yet the media response to the two performances was drastically different. If you're still not buying what I'm selling, let me present to you the 2014 and 2017 NFL seasons. In the 2014 season, there were 4 quarterbacks that were clearly playing above the rest: Aaron Rodgers, Tony Romo, Tom Brady, and Big Ben. All 4 had solid win-loss records, with Rodgers dominating the touchdown-to-interception ratio, Romo controlling the QBR and completion percentage categories, and Roethlisberger throwing for the most yards. 2014 also saw Roethlisberger put up a historic performance against the Colts, the only game in NFL history where a quarterback threw for 500 or more yards and 6 or more touchdowns. The following week, Roethlisberger threw for 6 touchdowns again against the Ravens. In the end, Aaron Rodgers won the 2014 MVP, with Tony Romo coming in second and being second-team All-Pro. Tom Brady received 1 MVP vote and 2 All-Pro votes. Unsurprisingly, Roethlisberger received 0 MVP votes and 0 All-Pro votes. Now, I'm not trying to say that Ben Roethlisberger should have won the MVP in 2014, but there's definitely a strong case for it. And regardless of that, the fact that he received 0 votes for either category shows a clear bias in the media against Big Ben. 2017 saw much of the same, with Carson Wentz, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, and Big Ben once again being the top of the quarterback position in the National Football League. Each quarterback had their own strong suit, and Roethlisberger led the league in yards up until Week 17, where he sat out because the Steelers' playoff position was already clinched. Even Jim Nantz brought up the fact that Ben Roethlisberger probably should have been considered for the MVP this year.
Brady, Brown, Wentz was a candidate. Maybe still some would say he had enough work to merit that, even though he's out for the season. Russell Wilson. And I would submit Ben Roethlisberger.
However, Tom Brady dominated the MVP in All-Pro voting, with Carson Wentz coming in second in MVP and second-team All-Pro, and Russell Wilson even getting an All-Pro vote. And you guessed it, Ben Roethlisberger got 0 votes again. Now in part 3, I'll break down just how unimportant MVPs and All-Pros are, but I just want to drive home this idea that there really is a media bias against Ben Roethlisberger for some reason. Now, I know some of you may be wondering how any of this proves why Ben Roethlisberger is the most underrated player in NFL history. What I had to do in part 1 is lay the groundwork to show you that there really is a media bias against Roethlisberger. If you come back for parts 2 and 3, I'll break down in depth why Ben Roethlisberger is the most underrated player in NFL history, and between you and me, those parts are a lot more interesting than this one, so definitely come back and check those out.